Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel, Everyday Life with Liz. My name is Melissa, if you didn't know, and today I wanted to share with you guys my labor and delivery experience during the pandemic. So if you are interested, just keep watching. So my original due date wasn't until July 28th, but they wanted to go ahead and induce me on July 16th because of my blood pressure. Now, my last few doctor's appointments towards the end of my pregnancy, my blood pressure was really good. It was in the 110s, 120s. So I kind of didn't know why they were rushing to induce me, but that's what they wanted. That morning, I woke up and took a shower. I got the kids up, fed them breakfast, got my boyfriend up, and we left and dropped the kids off at the babysitter's, got breakfast ourselves, and we headed to the hospital. When we got to the hospital, we were required to wear a mask. So we went up to the labor and delivery floor, and before we could actually go on the unit, they tested our temperatures, and they asked us questions if we had signs or symptoms of COVID, knew anyone who tested positive for COVID, and then they went over the visitor policy. The visitor policy, since it was phase 3, they told us that I was allowed to have one visitor, and it had to be him because he was the one who came to the hospital with me, and he was only allowed to leave one time. Then he had to sign a paper stating that he agreed to all of that. So once that was done, we were actually able to go to the unit, and we went to the registration desk, checked in, and then after that a nurse came out and took us to our room. So going to our room just threw me off because it was down a completely different hallway than I was used to. Every time I've ever been to this hospital, I've delivered down the same hallway, so I was kind of expecting that. But we went to a completely different room, and it was way smaller. And when we got there, she told me to just go ahead and undress, put the hospital gown on, and leave a urine. So I was doing that, and then I tried to poop because when I pushed, I didn't want to poop on myself. So I was in the mix of doing all that, taking forever in the bathroom, when another registration lady comes in, and I overhear her talking to my boyfriend, trying to get information from him because I was just taking so long in the bathroom. And I hurried up and came out of the door, answered her questions. She left, and the nurse came back in. So the nurse came back in, and she went over the visitor policy again, and she told us that if my boyfriend wanted to leave to get food or go check on the kids, or if we had animals and stuff at home, which we do, that he could leave and come back. He really just needed to try to limit the amount of times that he left. She also asked me if I wanted epidural, which I said yes, and if I wanted a blood transfusion if it was needed. So she started an IV and then paged the lab to do blood work. And then she checked me. I was 2 centimeters dilated, 50% effaced with the highest cervix. The midwife then comes in, does an ultrasound to see if the baby's head down, which she was, and then tells me that they're going to start me on Cervidil and see how I do. And then after that, they're probably going to give me some Pitocin. 50% effaced and 2 centimeters dilated. So they had to enter Cervidil to thin my cervix out a little bit more. And then she said they was going to check me round 2, and it's 10:15 now, so I've got a ways to go. So they entered the Cervidil at 10:15 and said that I was going to contract for 4 hours and try to get my body to go into labor on its own, so they wouldn't have to administer Pitocin. So 4 hours go by, my contractions were back to back. And the nurse was supposed to come back at 2, but because she was in another room dealing with another patient that was pushing for 3.5 hours, she ended up coming back close to 3. The nurse did check me before she gave me the pain medicine just to see how the Cervidil did, and I was 3 centimeters dilated and 70% effaced at this point, and I was just kind of discouraged because I was like, I was sitting here contracting back to back, and that's all that did. Gave me pain medicine. And thank the Lord that has helped me, because I was hurting. I've been contracting since 10 o'clock, around 10 something, and it is 3:12 in the afternoon, and I'm 3 centimeters dilated and 70% effaced. And I just got some pain medicine because that pill definitely made me start contracting. and he want to stay over there asleep. So she gonna come back and check. She told me to let her know when I got the epidural, when I wanted it. So all that pain medicine did really was just make me sleep in between contractions, because as soon as I started feeling that I was having a contraction, I would wake up, and then towards the end of it, I would go right back. So a few hours go by and I am in excruciating pain at this point. I'm tossing and turning in the bed. I'm trying to breathe through these contractions, and I felt wet. I thought my water had broke. So I screamed my boyfriend's name. As you can see, he was asleep. He wasn't waking up. The popsicles that they gave me on my lunch tray, I took them, I threw them at him. He still wasn't waking up. I had his phone, took it, threw it at him, still wasn't waking up, because I had called the nurse. They said someone would be in shortly, and about 15 minutes went by and I just couldn't take it anymore. So finally, a nurse comes in and she's like, I heard you screaming. Did you want me to wake him up? And I'm like, no, I wanted him up to get y'all in here. I think my water had broke. So she goes ahead and checks, and she's like, it's not your water, it's your bloody shell. So then I tell her I want the epidural, and she calls the anesthesiologist, and she comes in and about 10-15 minutes later and preps me to get the epidural. But before I can actually get it, I have to get medication and extra saline administered because I have bad side effects. So she gives me the epidural, and after that I end up puking. So she wanted to stick around about 15 minutes after that to make sure my blood pressure was good and to make sure that I had stopped throwing up. And then they told me if I was in any more pain, they gave me this epidural pump. They told me to press the button every 15 minutes. And if that doesn't work, to just let my nurse know when she'll come. So after I got the epidural, my contractions were numb in my stomach, but I felt a ton of pressure down there. So I let about an hour go by, and I had pressed the epidural pump 3 times to administer more of an epidural, but that did not do anything. So I was back to being in excruciating pain. I didn't feel the contractions, but every time I had one, I just felt so much pressure down there. It just hurt so bad. I was tossing and turning, and the monitor kept falling off. And at this point, it was probably 7 o'clock, because the nurse had came in with another nurse, and she was introducing me to her and telling her she was going to take care of me for the rest of the night. But I didn't even let her finish. I was like, call the epidural lady now. I'm in so much pain. So a man anesthesiologist comes in and says he's going to insert a bolus, which goes through the pump, and that's another round of an epidural pretty much. And then had the nerve to ask me, have you been pressing the button? And I'm like, do you really think I would tell the nurse to get you to come in here if I haven't been? Anyway, I got the bolus, and I was still in excruciating pain. Another hour goes by, and the nurse comes in and she checks me. I'm only 5 centimeters dilated with a bulging bag, and I just felt like I could not go on. I felt physically, mentally, and emotionally drained. Guess who decides to finally wake up and join the party? So he was hungry because we hadn't eaten anything since breakfast, and this was at 8 o'clock at night. I told him to go ahead and get food. I was only 5 centimeters dilated. I thought we were going to be there a while longer. So about 10 minutes after he left, I started feeling wet again, and I started feeling a crap ton of more pressure down there. And I tried to just hold it out as long as I could, but I couldn't do it anymore. I called the nurse and told her I felt like I had to push. So the midwife comes in, she checks me, and she was like, yeah, your water broke. And then she checked my cervix and was like, and you're 10 centimeters dilated. And I'm like, I'm 10 centimeters dilated already. And she's like, yeah, it's time to push. So I called him and told him it was time to push, and he needed to come back as soon as possible. So he did a U-turn and started heading back to the hospital. And I tried to FaceTime my sister-in-law because we were supposed to FaceTime while I was pushing. And my service sucked so bad in the hospital, I couldn't even do it. So I put my phone down, and she told me to push, and I pushed her out within 2 pushes. And my sweet baby girl was born at 8:22 p.m. As soon as I pushed her out, they put her on my chest, and my boyfriend had just walked in. So he was able to cut the cord, and then they cleaned her up and weighed her. She weighed 5 pounds, 11 ounces, the smallest baby I've ever had. And then we did the skin to skin. Well, then we started to notice that she didn't want to eat, and she was pretty much gagging and spitting up amniotic fluid. So they thought it was best to call the NICU in to do an assessment on her. So NICU came in and did an assessment on her, and they said she was perfectly fine. So while we were heading to my room, they told us that they didn't have any beds available on the actual postpartum unit, so we would have to go to the overflow. So when we got to the room was just really old. The TV was a box TV, and the bathroom was just so outdated. The toilet was so low to the ground. I knew it was going to be hard to get on and off of it. And the bed had some type of air mattress in it that would pump the back up and down, and then the leg part up and down. And I couldn't get another bed. Well, after we got situated in the room, we noticed that the baby still wouldn't eat. So the nurse said that if she doesn't eat within like the next 30 minutes, she was going to take her and do another assessment on her, which she went ahead and took her because she still didn't eat. And the nurse came back in about 30 minutes after she took her and said, the best thing for us to do is send her to the NICU, because I don't want something happening to her overnight because she's gagging, she's grunting, and she won't eat. So she told us that we could visit her one more time before she sent her to the NICU. So that's what we did. And then as soon as I seen her, I pretty much just lost it. I told her I loved her and I kissed her. And then the nurse had told us that we could go back to the room and she would let us know whenever we could see her. So we went back to the room, and all I could do was cry, and I ended up just crying myself to sleep. And I guess the nurse ended up coming in there at 12 o'clock in the morning when I was asleep, and she told my boyfriend that she was ready for us to see her if we wanted to, but she was like, just let her sleep, and whenever she wakes up, y'all can go. So I ended up waking up at 4:30 in the morning, and I went to the NICU by myself so I could see her. And they told me that she was doing okay, but she was still spitting up amniotic fluid. She still didn't want to eat, and she was still grunting. So they told me pretty much that they would take care of her, not for me to worry about anything, and for me to go back to the room and get some sleep. So I went back down there the next morning, and she was still the same. She still didn't want to eat. She was still grunting, but she wasn't spitting up that much amniotic fluid. So they wanted to run tests on her to make sure that she didn't have a infection in her lungs. And they said the tests weren't going to come back for 24 hours. So I kind of knew right then and there that she was stuck in the NICU that night too. So all I could do really was just pray. I just wanted my daughter to be okay. I wanted her to be with me because I only got to hold her one time. And this is something that's never happened to me before. I just wanted everything to be okay. So we had family members and friends calling us the whole time that we were there because they had seen that I posted on Facebook that I was in labor, but I never posted anything else. So I guess everybody kind of knew that something was going on, but I did not answer the phone because I could not keep myself together. And this is just a story that I didn't want to keep repeating over and over to people. So we told one person in our family, which was my sister-in-law. So throughout the day, we kept getting good news and bad news with her test results. And I'm a religious person, so all I could do was just pray. I turned to God and just asked him if he would just heal my child. All everybody else did was pray as well. And let me tell y'all how he came through. My daughter completely stopped gagging. She completely stopped spitting up amniotic fluid. She started eating. And her test result came back early, and it came back perfectly fine. The very last time I went to the NICU, they told me as long as she has a good feed, that she would be able to come back to the room with me. So I went down there to feed her. She had a really good feed. She didn't spit up nothing. And they told her that they were going to do one more assessment on her, and they would bring her back up to the room. So they finished everything up about 12 a.m. in the morning when I was asleep. They brought her back to me, and she did really good throughout the night, and she did really good the very next day, and they discharged us. I am grateful that God heard all of our prayers and healed my daughter. So that was just my experience during this crazy pandemic we got going on. And if you guys enjoyed the video, like, comment, and subscribe to my channel so you can see future videos. And I will see you in the next.